questions?
So I'm in between jobs and I have a job lined up, so I'm just waiting for um, you know, things, bureaucracy to proceed so that I can start. But until then I have a week or two where I have time. And so I'm looking at what I should focus on in this time, and I wanted your perspective of things that you can see that might be valuable for me to look at.
In the context of what? I mean, I can think of a lot of things
Um,
that are valuable for a young man to look at, but in what context?
so in the context of work and and just like what either specific to my domain, which is tech, AI,
Are you
or
fully prepared for the new job? Are you ready to just jump in and land on your feet and start running?
more or less.
Okay, so you've got all that stuff down,
Yeah,
and
I
now
have
you have a break.
one
But
task
now you have a break between jobs, correct?
exactly.
And you're ready for the new job to start. You're waiting for some bureaucracy to finish what it's doing, and you're asking what might you do in the interim. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Well, I don't know about you, but in between jobs, isn't that an opportunity to catch up on other things that you've neglected from working all the time in America, in the West, or wherever? I mean, if you're already ready to start, how much time do you have?
Another week or two.
Well, what are your inclinations
Well, so I've already been on this for 2 weeks now, I think, or yeah, 2 or 3 weeks now.
on the break?
Um, yeah. And so the
And
first
how do
thing
you
I
feel
did,
during this break?
pretty good. So the first thing I did, I took a break from caffeine, and
Oh, okay. So you're
I
getting
slept a
healthier.
lot. Yeah, yeah. So I slept a lot, I read a lot, and was been going to the gym regularly and kind of just slowing things down. And then as of this week, I started drinking coffee again, and I felt refreshed and I wanted to start working on things. So this week I started drinking coffee again and started working on some projects, and um, I'm going from there.
Can't wait to get back to work, huh? Is that true, or is that just a habit?
um, I'm genuinely like excited about the work and just the area of work in general. I think, um,
Has taking a
and so
vacation occurred to you?
I kind of did already. I went to Kentucky for a few days,
Okay.
but I'm stuck in the U.S., so there's no traveling allowed
Okay.
outside of.
Outside of the U.S.
Hmm.
Well, a lot of people would envy you because you have an opportunity to catch up on reading, on study, on going to museums, getting to those books you never read, reading some poetry, drawing, painting, all kinds of things. I mean, you've got it sounds like a month break, and
Hmm.
so why not? And you've already realized the importance of like refurbishing your health, right?
Hmm.
Going to the
Hmm.
gym, dropping coffee for a while. Why not round out the whole thing, and do something totally different than your work? It's in tech, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well,
why not do something totally different and become more of a rounded man for a
mhm.
while? I mean, you're asking the wrong person because I believe very much that people should not specialize too much in their youth or even in their middle age or their old age. That life is too wonderful for that.
Yeah, I agree. Um, One of the books I've been reading is From Third World to First by the Prime Minister of Singapore.
Interesting.
And yeah,
what have you learned?
a few things.
Well, teach
Um,
folks what you've learned.
well, one thing that's apparent in the book is that he's makes a lot of decisions from like holding on to integrity, and
Integrity. Okay,
integrity,
good, good.
uh, in truth, just being realistic
That's a
and
huge
pragmatic.
deal. It's sad to have to say it, but in this day and age, yeah, that's a huge deal. Just being a decent person with integrity.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you
A
saying that it
perennial
made me
truth, by
really,
the way. Go ahead.
right. It's made me really sad reading this book because it made it so obvious how like the leaders in the West right now are so far from that standing.
It's tragic, and it will destroy our society, and it is destroying
Mm.
it. It's sad. This is the way of the world. But if there's success begets complacency, and complacency begets laziness, and laziness begets cutting corners, and cutting corners begets telling half truths, and half truths begets telling lies and deceit,
Mm.
and taking advantage of people. So yeah, that's an important lesson. So good. That's what I mean. So read a book about history.
Mm. Do you have any recommendations on other books in that realm?
Oh boy, let's think. Nothing's jumping to mind at the moment,
Okay.
but I've been reading about the Mongols, and so I that's kind of the opposite in a way. But then of course the Mongols did civilize China. They brought together the North and South, and they became really hardcore Buddhists. And uh, yeah, it's interesting the way these things go in cycles. But a book like that, Third World to First.
Or even just like on the topic of like world politics or understanding how the world works at that level.
I'm going to recommend the Tao Te Ching, right? As a or the Art of War. The Art of War, the
Mm.
Tao Te Ching, the
I
Chuang
don't know.
Tzu, all are political commentaries. The politics is not something that I've really.
Or even history.
Let me think about that. That's a good question. Uh, that's a good question. Nothing pops to mind at this moment.
Okay.
Part of the problem is that history that I've been exposed to in my life has been so biased as to be almost unreadable.
Mm.
It's how about Sumerian history?
Aryan
No,
history.
Sumerian, before the Greeks.
Sumer.
Sumerian, Sumer. The ancient civilization of Sumer, the Sumerians. Or no,
Okay, I'm
no,
not
I have
familiar.
another one. Actually, it's the history of. Actually, this was an opera written by Philip Glass, and it's about the history of the first monotheist in Egypt,
Mm.
ostensibly. But history, yeah. So if you like music, right?
Hmm.
Philip Glass, who did an opera with Doris Lessing, did another opera. This is I forgot the name. Is it called Ra or something? The sun god, or it's something about the sun god, and it talks about the history of this particular epoch in ancient Egypt. Or another one is just to study the Sumer, Babylonia, the history of Mesopotamia. You know,
Mm.
it's much easier these days because first of all, there's a lot more archaeological data. Oh, I know. There's another one I'm reading about the history of South America, but I can't remember the guy's name, and it's not that well written. It's kind
Mm.
of a revisionist history of the Incas in South America. It's
Mm.
popular, but I can't remember the name of it. It's hard to find a history that's well written, in my opinion. That's not so biased that
Right.
you can't get through it.
Right. So that's what I like about this third world to first one is it's from his perspective, and he just kind of what he learned from different world leaders throughout his time, and
Well,
it
that's
it
fantastic.
feels a little biased. It's from his perspective, but it's definitely a different perspective than one that I'm used to.
Good. That's great. That's fantastic. And also, he's speaking of his own experience. That's wonderful. But that's so
Hmm.
contemporary. You know, you're going to call that history? That, I mean, you can.
For me, I mean,
Okay. All right.
I was born in the 90s.
Okay. Uh, there's other books that are just not popping to mind right now. The context is wrong for my brain to do that right now for some reason.
Okay.
Okay. Another question?
So in this book, he mentions Confucian values,
Okay.
um, and Confucianism, and that's one that I'm not familiar with, but I know it's closely associated or closely related to Taoism.
They were
Um,
contemporaneous, pretty much. Taoism being
was
the kind of
so
the root of Confucianism, and Confucius would talk about this old man, this Lao Tzu. It's probably not one person. It's probably a group of people. A kind of a the Taoists tended to. Well, I'm generalizing, which is a mistake. But the impression I get is that they tend to remain out of the political, the limelight per se, right? For all of the disadvantages that go along with fame and being identified as the the brains behind the situation, but they would confer with each other. And so that's a very nice history that you can read the history of Confucianism and Taoism in ancient China, and Clary does a magnificent job of this. Thomas
does he
Clary,
have
Thomas Clary, summa
part,
cum laude, Harvard, who studied in Japan and China, and and in the West, and is really a great source because he's dispassionate. And so often when you read history, what you're reading is somebody's idea of what they think would be nice to hear, or
right?
you know, the history of the Mongols is also interesting because it kind of crosses the whole world. And that was a huge empire, and that's been neglected. Uh,
Mm.
I'm not speaking about the conquest so much as the marriages with nobles and the dissemination of what it did to different cultures.
What does that mean?
I think it's something like one out of, I don't know about I don't know the accuracy of this, but I've heard it said that 1 in 16 people on this planet is descended from Genghis Khan and his immediate family.
Oh, yeah. Right.
That's quite an achievement.
Mm.
But if you read, so it's hard to read history because there's usually an axe to grind that the historian may have,
Right.
or they just don't understand. They can't understand. I noticed that with the biography of Elon Musk written by Walter Isaacson. He just didn't understand. It was beyond his capacity. And so we see that all the time. And so it takes a really extraordinary person. What about the Peloponnesian War? That would be good history right now.
The what?
The Peloponnesian War, I think, is how it's called. It's the history of Greece at the time of one ascending state and another descending state, and it talks about the inevitable. It speaks of the seeming inevitability of this situation, where there, if that is the configuration geopolitically, that war, in some people's opinions, is inevitable or almost inevitable. Thucydides wrote it, I believe. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but yeah, Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, and that would be some great history right there. That you should be read, I think,
Okay.
because we're in a situation very similar to that, and things are not looking great.
Right.
Okay, sir, I'm not much of a librarian, I'm afraid.
Now, give me a second. I was listening to one of the Doris Lessing videos that you posted,
Good. Thank
and
you for
I think it was
listening.
from, yeah,
Did you leave a like?
and she meant
Did you leave a like?
I might have.
Oh, good. Yay. Or subscribe? That's even
She
better.
meant,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I, of course, I'm already subscribed.
Oh, good.
Um, she said something along the lines of the way of learning, crammed all at once, um, in the context of like work or trauma of a person, is closer to the Sufi way of learning.
Say that again.
So she's talking about how people often learn things in a cramped period of time from things like periods of intense work or
Yes.
periods of trauma. And
Yeah.
then she goes on to say that that's closer to the Sufi way.
Yeah, because experience is knowledge. Okay, so and Krishnamurti said there's a tape of Krishnamurti that I recommend now to you in particular. It's a
The
bit
one you
difficult.
posted?
Yeah, the one I posted on the roots of thought. Uh, it was recommended to me, and I thought it was a little bit too dense or difficult or whatever. But now I've changed my mind. Anyway, Krishnamurti, about halfway through, I believe, says something about if you're in a car accident, you've learned something,
Yeah.
and you have. That's true knowledge, right, from experience. And so, yes, there are times when everything can be done, and in those times, enormous amounts can be learned. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be trauma, obviously. That would not be a great way to learn. But there's enough trauma in one's life that one can learn a huge amount from these. So let me make a few points about that. Anything that kind of alters your consciousness in a way, such as illness, fatigue, uh, a great emotional upset, like depression, despair, these shift the assemblage point, and you can absorb and observe things that you couldn't see otherwise. So that's point
Mm.
one. Point two is that yes, there are moments when everything just seems to be going. You've got a period of time, and you have the books with you, and you something's happened, and you've got some 2 weeks of free time that you hadn't anticipated. Maybe there's a fire at the factory or something. And if the configurations are right, the circumstances, the people, the conditions, and the intent are correct, then enormous amounts can be done in short periods of time. And that's a very important thing. And I thank you for bringing it up, because the Sufis understood this. It's very different than okay, you go 1 week to 3 lectures, the next week to 3 lectures, the next week to 3 lectures, and then you have a 2-week break and you study for the midterm, and then you take another 2. That's a very inefficient way to learn, it's because it's fixed.
Right.
And that's some of the limitations of the Western educational model.
Right.
Now, understanding that you can learn a huge amount if conditions and circumstances and people and the time is right is a core Sufi teaching. Yeah. And to that, I just add that even Krishnamurti points out that if you want real knowledge, you need experience. I think his example was unfortunate.
What is that?
I'm sorry?
What is that?
Oh, I have some little people over here that kind of help me out, cheer me on. Go ahead. Next quick. Does that help?
Yeah, we'll follow up on that.
Okay. Follow up.
Well,
Go ahead.
but the way that I understand it is that you can take by preparing for this, by like being open, receptive to moments like that, and by
And be prepared. Yeah.
right, you take advantage. Take advantage of it.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. I mean, when the gates of heaven open, you need to be ready, I guess. Or when the cubic centimeter of chance, there's different ways of describing the same thing. But yeah, people miss their opportunity because they're not prepared.
Right. So is that the Sufi way then, that being referred to by Lessing, or is there something more?
I'm sorry, you muffled a little bit. Say it again.
Is that the Sufi way that Lessing is referring to, or is there additional
It's
things?
the Sufi way, it's the Krishnamurti way, it's the Taoist way, and it's the Toltec way, right? And it's actually any,
Okay.
it's all these what shall we call them, paths? I don't know what to call them. All these isms, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, all that, they all do the same thing if they're going to be successful. They just do it in different ways depending on the culture and the time and the people
Mm.
that they're trying to deal with. Rumi had to get people up, and because everybody was sitting around on their butt in
Right.
Turkey at the time or something like that, somewhere around there, Ionia or some place, I'm not sure. And so he needed to get people up and moving and energized because they were just all lethargic. And so he created this dancing thing. And he thought, well, if they're going to be dancing like this, then I could put fields of color. And if there's fields of color, then I can use this for my more advanced students so they could contemplate the effects or be sensitive to the effects of color on the sensorium. And
Mm.
being Rumi, right, he combined all this together, right, because that was what was needed at the time. Now it's a tourist attraction, and nothing more. But there was a
Right.
time when it was a living, teaching circumstance. It's hard to get this across, actually.
Right.
And I've been to Sufi dancing. See, one of the things that I was assigned as a student was to go and investigate some of these. Well, in this case, a Sufi group. This is in Northern California, and I went in there, and there's all these guys dressed up in. Well, a few of them were in robes, and they were dancing around in a circle, and they were chanting different things. Who, it was just a clown show. And I learned then about clown shows and
Mm.
how easily people think that Sufis are the clown show because they can't tell they don't know the difference between the clowns, the imitations. They can't tell the fake gold from the real gold. And so every tradition suffers from this. Buddhism also. Hinduism, oh man, those poor guys. They've got clown shows all over the place. And so, but that's the world always has fakes and imitations, and people trying to capitalize or whatever on the authentic an authentic tradition.
The AI industry comes to mind right now.
Oh, really? Say more.
Well, there's all these companies trying to capitalize on the real advancements of AI by
Oh yeah,
releasing
yeah.
all sorts of projects.
Yeah, AI is in every marketing, every quarterly report.
There's like companies that change their name from something crypto to something AI, like
Yeah.
you know. Um,
That's always going to happen. Because our brains work by association. And that's why it's important who you associate with, by the way.
mm,
And so that's
mm,
one of the limited weaknesses of our brains, right?
right.
Did you happen to listen to that? Did you say you had listened to the Roots of Thought one, the Krishnamurti? No, I was recommending that to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, listen to that and see what you think. Another question?
Is, does that come from one of his books, or is,
Krishnamurti wrote very little. He may have written 3 skinny little books, and most of them are yeah. So it's easy to read everything Krishnamurti wrote. Much more of his work is done in public talks, and there's a particularly useful series with David Bohm, the physicist.
yeah, I remember listening to that a long time ago.
Right. How long did that take roughly to listen to the whole thing? I recall spending about 40 hours on it. Is
Yeah,
that
they're long.
yeah?
I don't remember long. I remember them being long though.
I don't know if I could do that now, but there was a time when that was a possibility, and you take it, right? And so it's kind of like that. It's the way everything is. You can't dictate The way has its own ways, and so there will be a time, like
Right.
I've said before, the time when some things can be done, a time when nothing can be done, and a time when everything can be done. And it's
Mm.
important to know the difference and prepare for all three of those times.
Right.
And so, yeah, okay.
Just as an aside, when you're working for a corporation and they expect you to work 9 to 5, how do you like manage that when you know that there's times everything can be done and times nothing can be done?
Well,
Well,
one way would be to have a let's say, just imagine three piles of different tasks. One set of tasks are just kind of thoughtless, meaningless. You got to do it. You got to sort this, or you got to, file this, or something routine. There's another set
Mhm.
of tasks that are, involve interacting with others and working in a team. And then there's another set of tasks that are just individual initiative and creativity and application. You can, I mean, that's completely arbitrary, but the notion that you would have different categories of things, and when there's a time when nothing can be done, you can sit there and file, or whatever you guys do, clean out your
Yeah.
desk and reorganize it, or reorganize your books or something. But then when the time's right, then you go to some of the other tasks and get those done. Busy work, I think that's what they call it. Get the busy work done when nothing can be done,
Yeah.
rather than get
I think I'm
frustrated. Rather than get frustrated.
Yeah, in my experience and a lot of people I talk to, I feel like this idea people intuitively know, but there's this remnants of like the industrial age where you would just work a meaningless thing 9 to 5, right? The factory workers would do the same thing every day, 9 to 5. I mean,
Yes, the
that
the
work.
what is it called, the what do you call the
People,
production line that Ford was supposed to have invented? The production line, the assembly line.
yeah,
And that's what that infected everything, our education, right? That's where it was
right. And
particularly.
people
Go
think like all the information jobs, like they still act like it's like that, and like we need to churn out code 9 to 5 as if. But then intuitively, everybody knows that that doesn't work, and it's and but then because it's not like it's not a commonly like agreed upon thing. People just pretend to work instead of when there's times where things can't be done, they just pretend things are being done instead of.
Yes, and
And
then
then
you get
maybe
entire generations that pretend. I hear that's what's happening in Japan, where it's lived out its lifetime. They're corporate now, right? And now it's
what's
two or
happening
three
here,
generations. Go ahead.
what's happening here, especially now that people work from home, have their computers automate click. The companies have software that monitor if your mouse is moving, and so the employees they get software that just moves the mouse.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's not going to work very well.
I don't know.
So Elon Musk points to a situation where the Optimus robots and other robots are operating. The AIs are working as they should, and the cars are self-driving, and factories are run by these machines, and that there's no limit on how large the economy can grow, which basically means the end of work. How do you guys see that?
Well, the way I've been seeing it recently is that the economy will grow and there's just going to be more opportunities and people will need people will still be needed for all sorts of jobs, and there's all sorts of jobs right now that like aren't really valuable, but like they're not needed for production. They're more like entertainment and things like that. When I was in Kentucky, we went to a horse race,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a perfect example where like horse racing, horses are were made irrelevant by cars 100 years ago.
Don't tell
But
them
there's
that.
this, but
Okay, all right, we won't. Okay, go ahead.
this horse racing industry is like propping up the whole state's economy
Yeah,
almost,
okay,
you
that's an
know.
interesting example.
And so like maybe there's just going to be all sorts of opportunities like that that people will have because they have access to these robots to and AI to do all the hard work, and now they can do other, like there's all sorts of things that you can do now. In the past you couldn't because you needed a lot more capital
So you
for any
believe that
worker.
it's a possibility that the economy, I mean, the size of the economy can grow so large that we humans don't have, we get to choose what we want to do
I think
almost
so.
completely.
But I think
Good, good.
it seems that people will always need to work because otherwise, like it's human nature needs to work, right?
Well, I'm not so. I wouldn't say work. Humans need to grow. If they're not
Mm.
growing in one way or another, now what happens is they displace their own growth onto the growth of their money pile, right, or the growth of their company. But I would say that
Mhm.
all things in nature must grow or they die. I mean, they grow and then they die. And
Right.
I would say that it's not so much work that people need. Work is a substitute, or is a symbolic substitute for growth, and that will always be with us. And so then there'll be huge industries of growth, right? Of how to grow anything. I mean, some people are different. Some people want to learn how to shoot arrows, right? Archers.
Hmm.
Some people want to race
Right.
horses. So that's not the
And,
important part, but the part is to be growing, right?
right. Yeah. And to add to that point, things like there's all sorts of these small industries. Like, I mean, just like people who are learning how to shoot arrows, like there's there's whole like tiny industries that prop up to like, that are
Bows and arrows,
just
right?
that that like advanced technology. They use the new technology to make them better, and people spend a lot of money on their hobbies. So I feel like that could just grow, keep growing, and everybody's going to have these niche hobbies, and there's all these tiny little markets that are created.
Yeah, it's a time of plenty, like it is now,
Yeah, but
actually.
I think the main problem is just like that transition there, and if too many people's jobs get displaced too fast, then there's chaos or unrest or
I'm
something,
sorry, say that
right?
again.
The transition to it is the tricky part because if too many jobs get displaced all at the same time, then that can lead to unrest and
I think we've
chaos.
already been going through it. I think the work week hasn't a work week short. I mean, try to get something done on Friday afternoon. There's nobody there.
No.
I mean, even if they are there, they're kind of checked out. So that's one. It's the work week is shortened. Uh,
Mhm.
there's more holidays. It's a long time since the Industrial Revolution. It's
Mhm.
about time we upgraded, I think. So
Right.
this is interesting. So there's reasons to be optimistic. Many reasons to be optimistic.
Hmm.
So why is everybody so pessimistic?
The media.
Yeah, it's poison. It's poison. It's poison. Yeah, and I try to
Yeah.
warn people that they need to guard their minds. There's things that we need to be alert to and aware of. That's true, but it doesn't need to be put in the hideous frame that is put in routinely. Can I mention something about psychotherapy and how I think that's going to change also? I think
Mm.
psychotherapy is going to have to move to a model of growth. That
What do you mean?
Okay, so if you look at the DSM-5 or 4 or whatever it is now, 4TR, 5TR, text revision, you'll see that everything is divided up into these different pathologies. Or you're anxious, or you're character disordered, or you're depressed, or you're autistic, or you're this, or you're that. And that's all fine and good for a prior epoch. But now, excluding the biologically based diseases of the brain, right? Like just like you would have a liver tumor or something, excluding those kinds of diseases of the brain, all the others are problems of growing and adapting. They're not about pathology, they're about growth. and somebody's become fixated in one set of symptoms. Oh, I've been traumatized. Oh, I'm a depressive person. Oh, I'm a a this or a that. But whatever it is, growth is the only way out of it. So I think that that's going to psychotherapy itself will evolve beyond identifying a particular pathology and then saying we're going to fix that.
That makes sense.
Now, that would be nice. That would be nice. It wouldn't be great if we had a culture where humans were held up for the precious things that they are, precious beings that they are, and we took care of them instead of trashing our children and each other. I think there's reason to be optimistic if we could just elevate our consciousness just one more notch more, just a little bit. No one's asking for a revolution, just an evolution. And I'm hopeful the AIs will help with that. You spoke of history, right? So history, used to be reading a bookshelf of books, right? If you wanted to understand the history of Mexico, you'd have to go through about 20 books at least just to get started.
Right.
And most of that was just garbage, frankly,
right.
Biased garbage. But now there is YouTube and video and easily generated pictures and text and you can search for the material and you can search the planet, right? Easily. So that's a whole new epoch of teaching and learning. And we have to adapt to that. Or we won't know anything. All right, sorry, next question.
On the topic of AI,
okay,
and children. So I know there's like the study where like babies need attention from humans to develop properly, right?
Babies?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, people in general.
What about 40-year-old men? What about 20-year-old women? No, attention is a human need. It's a foundational human need, and that's something the Sufis taught us that we have yet to absorb in our in our academic towers or in general. And if we ignore that need, we get a lot of the results that we see now on X and TikTok and Instagram. People need attention like they need food or sleep. I'm sorry.
So one, what is attention? And two, does it have to be human? Can AI provide attention? Intuitively, I think it's no, but I don't know why I think that.
I don't know the answer to that yet. Now, with regard to a living creature, a dog can certainly provide attention. Right? And a dog needs attention, so that's a happy circumstance. Can a non-conscious, I presume you mean non-conscious AI, right? I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I really need to contemplate that. You should do it too. It's not, and all I'm going to do is give you one opinion. Much better for you to decide on your own.
Right.
I know where my bias is, so that's the first step, right?
Right.
Good question.
Because with babies, you just have to look at, and animals as well. I mean, dogs, you just have to look at them.
And well, yeah, on Instagram too. You just need to look at them, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those beautiful, attention is one of those beautiful, built-in, incredibly subtle aspects of the way that's invisible, but nonetheless incredibly powerful and much more important than we realize now. Probably in 100 years, we'll go, oh boy, how did we miss that? But if you look at the interaction of everything that exists, that's alive on this planet, you'll see that there's always this interaction. There's always this nothing exists inherently alone. It can't. At every level, at every scale. And so even at the level of the abstract, there's going to be this interaction, because otherwise, how can anything flower, grow, effervesce?
What do you mean by the level?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by even at the level of the abstract?
Well, some things only exist abstractly. Think of words or concepts. They only exist abstractly.
Right.
You know who's good about this is David Deutsch again, and his Beginnings of Infinity.
Mm.
And these abstract entities are real, like in mathematics especially. They're very real, and you can use them.
Mm.
And so coming to terms with the abstract, with that which has no form, the formless, is another one of the tasks of our century. Although that was described beautifully, as you know, by the second century Buddhists, the Hawaiian Buddhists. And here we go. I'm going to plug the book again. These guys describe the formless realm in considerable detail. Love doesn't have a form per se, does it? And yet it motivates so much of what we do.
Right.
So, all right, next question. Good. Contemplate that. You're the AI guy. Contemplate whether or not AIs will be able to meet attention needs.
I really thought that in the end, you just have to experiment with it and see.
No, that's no fun. That's not fun. No, you gotta. Yeah, come on. Use the old noggin.
Well, I mean, I'm saying that because I can imagine you could build a robot that interacts with a child and whatnot. But would that?
Interesting thought. But how much of that is reflected from the child, projected and reflected?
What do you mean?
Okay, so
How much?
I could talk to Google or Alexa or whomever, right? And I project a certain amount of agency and a certain amount of personality and a certain amount of itness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a child doesn't have the limitations. A child can live in the second attention till the cows come home, right? So the child can imagine anything. The child can literally, I've seen them do it. They take two little sticks and make them into people, and they're walking down the road, and this one says this to this, and this one says that to that, and it's wonderful. As a child psychiatrist, this is something we do all the time. We take their play, which is incredibly free and imaginative. Like there's this tall guy and there's this midget, and they're walking down the road, and the small one says to the big one, "Hey, will you carry me around on your shoulders?" He says, "Sure." He puts him on his shoulders, and they go walking some more, and then they can do this all day, because they aren't constrained by they aren't limited to the first attention, right? And so they can play on the left side. And so, is that what we mean by attention? I don't know. We see a lot of this we need to work out. And so there's a perfect example of how much work and beautiful work there is to be done in the future. The future starting, tomorrow or tonight, on these kinds of questions. But a child's relationship to a toy or his imagination is different than what the adult is left with. The adult is left with almost no second attention.
Mm.
And so it has to be cultivated, but how do you cultivate that? Some people are gifted at it, others are impoverished. But just talking about it that way could be a real contribution to our civilization. Now, we haven't mentioned the sex bots, although that's going to come up immediately, right? How much gratification?
Oh.
Go ahead.
I said, oh yeah, those are.
Or here's another thought experiment while we're here. In the movie Her, you're familiar with that movie, correct?
Mhm.
Everyone should watch it because I mean, it's important information about how humans and AIs will likely interact. I mean, they already have. What this guy spending? What was he spending? 20,000 a month on AI girlfriends? Some guy in Miami. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I saw that. I don't know if
How do you
it's
spend
true or
20
not,
grand
but
on an AI girlfriend? My God.
well, it's
Somebody's
probably
making some money too, right? Some
yeah. Assuming he's making millions, so 20 grand is just like $20 to a normal person.
Still, somebody's raking it in. Somebody's making that amount too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so in the movie Her, everything was hunky dory, right? They were all close and gooey, and all it was always very very nice. But then he finds out that she's got, I don't know what, 100,000 boyfriends, just like him. What does that do to his sense of her attention? And is that attention the same? And if not, why not? And then
Yeah.
we take that same paradigm, that same experimental model, and now apply it to another situation of attention, say with your kids or with a 20-year-old woman or with a 40-year-old man, and see how it plays out. And just do it the thought experiment. So the thing that I would say that we've lost the most since the turn of the last century, at the turn of the last century, I'm talking 1900, I wasn't there, okay? But I can see from the work that was done by the Dadaists and the Surrealists and Dali and Picasso and Freud and Jung and all these, and then there was Radio Shack, and there was just a whole culture of, hey, let's use our minds, let's play with our minds, let's learn, let's create, let's tinker around, and there's some of that obviously, but it seems limited. Maybe it's coming back in robotics, maybe it's coming back, but it seems so circumscribed and so little compared to how it used to be. And even in the 50s, in the 60s, kids would go to the hardware store and make stuff just for fun.
I feel like that's still a thing.
It
I
is a
think
thing. It is a
there's
thing. I agree. But how much of that is just tech, pure tech, or robotics?
was was it not like that before? Like going to the hardware store and building stuff. Was that not tech in the past as well?
No, people were making all kinds of crazy inventions. At the back of the magazine, at the back of the comic book, they'd be say, "Hey, sell us your invention," right? And everybody was a little inventor, and that was part of being a kid, was like playing around with your mind and your imagination and whatever was around. I'm not saying that we've lost it all. I'm saying that we're going to need to resuscitate. I mean, it would be nice if we resuscitated. And all I'm trying to do is say these kinds of thought experiments with regard to AI and attention,
Mm-hmm.
those can be fun. That can be the equivalent, right? In the new age, in the new time. And what I'm really trying to avoid is like scolding people for saying you've gotten lazy with your minds. You're not using your minds that God gave you to do the incredible things that the human's capable of. You've lost the scope of your potential, and get it back. It's easy. Just realize that it's a gift, not a burden. The mind,
Mm.
right? So that's my preaching for the day. Okay. Oops. I just see kids and I want them to be happy.
Right.
And that's part of it. Okay. Anything else before we stop?
Um, Last thing, the on the practice of zooming in or out,
Oh, yeah. Good, good, good.
you said the first step is believing that you can do it.
Well, that one you most certainly can do. No, I'm talking about stopping thought.
Oh, that one. Right.
That's for stopping thought. The zooming in and out, that's to give perspective. You can easily see this universe is relative in size, and time and space. It's increasingly acknowledged that these are derivatives, that they're constructs of mind. They're just the way that our brain sees things, right? Time and
Hmm.
space. Just knowing that, what I'm about to say shouldn't sound so crazy, but basically you can shrink the universe to as small as you want or as big as you want, because it's an abstract construct. I don't want to go too far down there because it'll sound crazy, but the zooming in and out to visualize carefully and slowly the actual scale of the universe that we find ourselves in, to open the mind wide, as wide as the universe. Start with a galaxy, or start with a planet, then go to the galaxy, or go to the moon, then go to the galaxy, then go to the universe. It takes a while. It's a big thing. Mm. And then once you've done that, which is relatively easier, then zoom down to the Planck length, if possible, to the infinitesimally small, but still, or to quarks or something, something of that order. And you'll find that humans are embedded right in the middle. It's quite incredible, which makes perfect sense. Just like we find ourselves in the middle of the universe, of course, right? It's our universe. Yeah. And so these are just exercises for students of Dharma, to give their mind some space to move in, and you realize how much space there is in reality, and you're not necessarily constricted to this little, bone bowl. And so that's a preliminary for other exercises. The other thing was stopping thought, which is always nice and a feature of the awakened state. But I know from experience that for a long time I didn't believe it was possible. I tried a little bit. One of my teachers said, well, just, that space in between your thoughts, just increase it. And I tried that, and it worked a little bit, but it wasn't anything, and then I realized much later that it could be done, and I realized how much I had believed that it wasn't possible. And how that had kept me from doing it. So that's why I lead with, hey, you got to believe that it's possible, or it's never going to happen. Do you see?
And so, yeah, so that transition from not believing to believing, is it just like a slow transition where like slowly you believe it more and more, or is it kind of an on-off thing?
Well, hopefully it's an on-off. You just say, hey, yeah, that guy's, he's right. Maybe I, if I don't believe I can do it, I'll never do it. Right, if in order to get to the top of what is the name of that mountain face in Yosemite? What's that called? El Capitan or something. If you want to get to the top of El Capitan, you got to believe you can do it. If you don't believe you can do it, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's step one, right? And then the rest is more, traditional ways of calming the mind with the breath. Tasty. Or calming the using the mind to calm the body by going to some visualization that chills you out. Mm-hmm. Once one becomes familiar with these states, two things. One is you realize how just blissful they are, and two, they come together like beads of mercury and become a stage, right? So we're after stages of development, not states of consciousness. That's another difference between a more modern and advanced way of looking at things than just going after the spills and chills and thrills of a particular state, which you can do with hallucinogens, psychedelics, or you can do with breathing exercise. You can do it with 1,000 different things. You can change your state, but we're about evolving to another stage. Okay, sir?
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you. No.
Have fun. Use your mind. And watch out for those tech guys doing all kinds of weird stuff. Okay? Take good care.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.